Selectmen meeting to order at 6:34 tonight. Selectmen Shea, Braccio, and Stivers present. We're here with a joint meeting with the school committee tonight. Couture?
I'll call the school committee meeting to order. We have nameplates.
First of all, thank you very much to the school committee for hosting this tonight.
Thank you for coming.
We appreciate that. And the purpose of tonight's meeting is a joint meeting with the Southborough School Committee and our board to fill the vacancy that exists on the Assabet School Committee. That vacancy was created when the person who held the position at the time resigned. The appointment will be for the remainder of the term, which will end in May of 2020, at which time there will be an open election for a full 4-year position. So, as required by the rules and regulations of the Assabet School Committee, if there is a vacancy, the Board of Selectmen and School Committee from the impacted community will act jointly to make the appointment to replace the vacancy. Couture and I have reached out on a number of occasions, had phone calls, text messages, emails on the process for this, and what I'd like to do is, the position having been advertised, we received 2 applicants. We closed the application period the end of August. At this point, what I would like to do is have each of the 2 candidates that did apply come up, just give a brief introductory statement, tell us about yourselves, tell us about your interest in the position. At that point, we can go through and ask questions. Again, we're acting jointly in this. I'll start to my right and go left. I can ask if everybody could just limit it to 1 question to start, just so we can go through and give everybody an opportunity to ask a question. If we need to come back and ask additional questions, we can. And then jointly we'll deliberate amongst ourselves and vote to see who we think is the best candidate to fill the position. So with that, if I could have the 2 candidates come forward, please.
Can I raise a question?
Yes, Paul.
I wonder if it would make more sense to have them one at a time, have one wait outside while we talk to one, so they can hear what each other says. That's the way we've always done it when we had to fill the school committee position.
We haven't done it that way. No, typically our board will, have an open discussion with everybody, and so how do people want to proceed?
I don't have strong feelings out of it.
Yeah, so if that's the way the majority outnumbers.
We can take a vote.
That we could. So I guess.
I mean, if that's the way you guys have done it, and that's the way you conduct school committee business, I mean, it's a joint meeting.
I think it doesn't put. I think it doesn't put either candidate at a disadvantage. Okay, probably fair to both. So.
Okay.
This is the first time I've been through an appointment process, so I'll defer. Either way sounds fine to me. It's the way we've always done it.
It is the way school committee appointments have been handled.
We are certainly in your venue, so.
All right.
Home field advantage.
So with that, I'm just going to start alphabetically. Ms. Cahill, if you start. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that.
Please come back.
Please go. Let's see, where do we want to have...
Where would you like me to stand?
I think
or sit?
No. Have a seat.
Sit.
Sit.
Yeah, sit down.
Okay. So there's one name, I'm Doris Cahill, and there's many of you. A little bit about myself. So I'm a resident of Southborough, about 20 years at this point, but a resident of Metro Boston about 35 years at this point. Career-wise, I'm actually a CPA. I spent 30 years in a public accounting career and then had a company for about 15 years. And I retired, or semi-retired, or transitioned in maybe about 7 or 8 years ago now. I'm very involved since that period doing various volunteer efforts. having done some volunteer efforts here in Southborough during that time period. You know, I've done everything from helping with bee photographs to counting frogs. So I think I'm manning I'm manning a station at the Harvest Fest this weekend. I just finished a stint from overseas, so it's a big transition for me. I spent 27 months in U.S. Peace Corps, where I worked with youth, women in civic engagement, disabled, and one of my specialties, which is business development. So I actually was living in a post-Soviet country, Georgia, not the state, but the country, and that's located in Eastern Europe, borders Black Sea, Russia, Turkey. And I was about 10 miles from the Turkish border during that period of time, where I was taught language and a lot of additional skills that I didn't have going into core, besides language, which was a challenge, but you had to become literate. And as I speak Georgian, intermediate advanced Georgian at this point. Did a lot of work in grant writing, facilitating grant writing for the U.S. Embassy, Japanese Embassy. Worked very closely with very impoverished people in that section of the world. And it was actually a very difficult physical experience, but a wonderful, challenging experience to somehow impact youth, somehow impact disabled children, or just nowheres where we are with our ADA and our needs for disabled children. I am back. I saw the advertising. I'm deliberately seeking volunteerism again. So this sparked my interest from my youth, more than a relationship with my children going through the Southborough school systems, which they've done very well. In my town where I grew up, I actually grew up in Connecticut in a town called Danbury. They had a very successful technical school program, an alternative education program for those in youth who could be at risk, or those in youth who were better served to go into trades. So that's kind of why the ad struck my interest. I'd like to be in a volunteer facilitative role, not a leadership role. I've spent a good chunk of my life being a leader, and I'm more about helping to develop. So if you have ideas, I can bring skill sets or perspective to it. If there are opportunities, of course, I'm very financially technical, and now grant writing too, so I can bring anything from a real vast variety of skill sets, I think, to help out. So I want to help is why I'm here.
Thank you. So we'll start with questions, Mrs. Stivers.
Thank you. Yes, I've, as an advisory committee member, I very much enjoyed the annual visit from the Assabet folks. I think they do a great job. Mm-hmm. And but given that they're apparently, as far as I know, in a very strong position now, are there things that when you look at what they're doing, are there things that you say, wow, we could do better or different or more in these particular areas? There are opportunities that you would be interested in pursuing as a committee member?
That's a really good question. You know, I need to get to know people. You know, I'd love to get to know them. So I don't know them personally, but I'd probably be first to listen to their challenges, or, you know, rather than say off the bat what I'd like to see. So I don't know their processes for how they assess and track children. So that's of great interest to me, how they assess and track children, and to get them the best possible success and get them jobs and be fruitful citizens. So, I'd probably have opinion about that. I wouldn't say I'm a wilting flower by any means, but I would definitely have opinion on any practices. And I'm more of an analytical person. If they wanted me to look at data, where's it working and where's it not working? We want to break the wheel when the wheel's not broken, because we never really hear a lot of bad news coming out of Aspen right now. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Ms. Brush.
First, thank you for stepping forward to volunteer. It's always wonderful to see new volunteers step forward, someone that may not have served the town in an official capacity, but I've talked to a lot of people, and you've done a lot of things in town behind the scenes, environmentally wise, with some of the animals and whatnot. So I thank you for stepping forward. My question to you is, there's a lot of volunteer positions in town, and we're very fortunate that you stepped forward. Your skill set is very broad. And I just wondered if you looked, if this was where your heart was, or if you've kind of looked at some of the other volunteer opportunities. There's over, I believe, 29, 30 opportunities available. If you had the opportunity to look and see if maybe one of those would be geared more towards your skills, or is this really where you want to be?
So, yeah, so I have a real love of nature and conservation, and if you look at some of my resume, you'll see that moving through it, my love of sports and my love of nature. But just equally and also strong is that my children and other people's children, and that's what's attractive in me, attracts me to the volunteerism, and I looked very vigorously to kind of give a framework when I was looking to go volunteer, and I deliberately was looking to go volunteer, somewhere where I could succeed. It's taken moderately seriously, so I have an interest in this, and I would also have interest, more possibly, in conservation.
Wonderful. Again,
Children.
thank you for stepping
Yeah,
forward.
for children.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
This
So-
is an interesting format.
Well, it's new to everybody, so.
Yeah, so, okay, just had to say that, kind of release some energy.
So I guess the question I had, obviously we're here tonight to make an appointment to fill the remainder of the term. Just curious what thought you've given to running for the position next May, where the current term would expire in May.
Right. So, granted, everyone's successful, I would very seriously consider running for the position in 4-year time. I learned a little bit about this appointment that I was not aware of how this format works. So I'm very considered running for it as more of a long-term resident. And if we're all successful, yes, I would do that for sure. I want people to be happy with me, and I want to be happy with them too. So, yeah, definitely.
Jessica.
Hi. Thanks for being here. It's nice to finally meet you. I hear your name everywhere.
Yeah, that's right.
So, I guess my question would be, I was going to kind of ask what Lisa asked, but so I'll think. I think what I'd just like to know is, why, what interests you about ASSA?
Right. So, what interests me is the technical and my upbringing, the value for operational or trades, successful tradespeople. My family, I was one of the first college educated. My family was in trades. I was surrounded by family business, all in trades. So I have a personal interest towards it. Also, not necessarily, it's a view. Some people are very, very successful, more happy, possibly heading into the trades than they may necessarily go into a different route or a 4-year degree route, and it may become unsuccessful. So I think we have some youth at risk that may be more capable and more successful taking another route. So I don't know what that application process looks like. When I was overseas, I'm not sure how autonomous the committee is, but when we were overseas, we were really challenged with how do we motivate youth for volunteers, and how do we motivate youth well beyond a Soviet thinking, which is not capitalistic, it's not even close to being entrepreneurial. So I have I believe I was chosen because I do tend to think a little bit out of the box and have a good temperament to come up with very creative solutions. U.S. Peace Corps has been in Georgia for 17 years, and that's often the question we're asked: what could we do different? What could we do different for a group of women or a group of youth to engage them more, not to want to leave their country? We have to have brain drain there.
Thank you. Actually, a lot of the questions have already been asked. I feel it's a little redundant to ask my question, but I guess you have a lot of really broad experience here, and you've kind of mentioned this indirectly. But of all of the things that you've done so far, what do you think? What skill or experience do you bring from those experiences that you think will be particularly helpful in this case? And you've kind of touched upon that a little bit already.
Probably, I don't know if it's going to apply, but I have a particularly strict or very ambitious work ethic, and sometimes that can be translated into youth and children, and creating programs that may engage them more, so that they can be successful in terms of not necessarily monetary, but successful in terms of being in a career, not having youth come back or adults in adulthood, which I consulted a lot in my adult life, where they're not happy with their employment, they feel boxed in, and they're kind of just going through the motions. So I don't know if that's going to answer it, but my entrepreneurial skills, I was kind of hatched. I was going to say I was hatched. Help drive some type of change that I think is important as things, technology changes and parents involved and interact with their children has changed. Even the bus schedules have changed. So all those things impact a day. So any area of that. So that I'm a broad thinker. Okay.
Hi, I'm so glad you're here. I feel like we're very lucky to have you and another interested person. It's really amazing. So I guess the question I have, you kind of alluded to it before, that your children went through the school system, and I'm just wondering what your exposure to and involvement in the regional school systems has been, even if you haven't had direct involvement with Assabet so far, but what's your
Right.
experience?
So I'm a classic working mother. It was difficult. I traveled. I traveled quite a bit when I was working as a consultant accountant the last 15 years. But whenever I could, I attended the field trips when they were going to middle school. I enjoyed the field trips. I enjoyed engaging. If they'd go to the museum, I would go to that. If there was a committee for the prom or something, or the dance, I would attend that. But I wasn't the person at the meetings to implement change. I was the mother working in a family unit, trying to see that my girls could go to school. That's my focus with the girls in a different way, so people make choices. And that was my involvement. But I am very familiar with the school. And the girls did well. They both did well. At the end of the day, we say.
That's great.
My children are 30 and 27 now. And I'm very proud of my girls. One's a STEM, one, she's a mathematician, and the other one's is working more in social work and public health. Both good trades. So both good trades. Yeah.
Can I ask a clarification before I ask my real question?
Sure.
Sorry, did you girls go to the Southborough schools? Or
They did. They did go. One started at Trotter through high school. Right, she started at Trotter, and the other one went to Neary, then Trotter. I lived in Framingham. I lived in Hopkinton.
Okay.
But they went to Wayland Academy before they went to Southborough School. So they went to Wayland Academy in Framingham, which is off Brook Street.
Okay.
So it's not Montessori style, but it's a style of that type.
So my question then is about your level of familiarity with Assabet in particular, or vocational schools in general. You mentioned you grew up in Danbury where they had a good one, but
They had a good one in Danbury, Connecticut, and they had an alternative education in Danbury, Connecticut. And I have several relatives that worked as counselors in the school system, librarians in the school system, and social work for the disabled in the system when I was living in Danbury.
What about Assabet in particular?
I don't have a direct opinion one way or another. I don't know the inner workings of Assabet. I put it on my resume. So, no.
Okay.
No, I've never had a child go there. I have very good friends who possibly regret not sending their children to Assabet, if that's of help. They're not really finding good placement. They try to get to Quincy, and they just lack some, they're one of the few, but they lack some of the reading and English skills that they need to kind of get through the Quincy process. So I have a couple samples of that. So that's not either, that's the child's ability, not a reflection of the school necessarily, but possibly they could be a candidate more targeted. So they're taking some night classes at Assabet. And I read the manual for the Assabet night classes, which is pretty robust.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I got nothing. Well, what's really sad is, I don't know whether it was Jess or Jen that was complaining about how difficult it was to be 4th or 5th, and there were no questions left. And then she took my question.
She did?
Yeah, it's a particular. Anyway, so I'm going to ask something, but rather than construct something that sounds thoughtful, okay?
Right.
I'm curious about your language on the CV, which says you speak intermediate mid-Georgian. So how many Georgian languages are there?
So Georgia is placed in the Caucasus. It was isolated, the northern and southern Caucasus, so they have a unique language, one language in the world and a unique alphabet. It's like a level 3-4 language, so you need to learn it. It's the mother language of the country, and it's a requirement because you wouldn't be able to communicate. Russian would be the second language, and many of my cohorts would speak Russian. Young people could really run circles around me in language because they do language studies and Russian studies. A lot of the volunteers in my group were multilingual. It's very difficult to learn, but it's like learning anything new. Assabet would have a new element to it. I'm going to have to figure that out. In like Georgian, I studied 4 hours a day, 6 days a week, and I still didn't do well. And then I had to get a tutor, and in about a year I could speak and work. I can't work with the community if I can't speak the language. So it's, even if you had an interpreter, it doesn't connect as well. So yeah.
I guess I'll say spasiba. So
Excuse me?
Spasiba, you know, and it's a little bit Russian.
Oh no, I didn't know.
It's not Georgian.
Oh no, Shezleva would be like Georgian, oh please. Ukatsrava would be like, please excuse me, and he would address everyone very formally. I know Pechi's stove, because I haven't lived by. Pechi's the stove.
Yeah. I'd also like to thank
you freeze in the winter.
I'd also like to say thank you for stepping forward.
Yeah, no, I'm happy. I want it. I'm just gonna say I want it. I've got a candidate, you know, and just do what's right for the school, do what's right for Southborough. So, yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? All right.
I just have one quick question,
Sure.
if you don't mind. If on the off chance that you don't get the support of the board for the aspect, I'm not saying you're not, would you consider volunteering for another position of the vacancies within the town?
Yeah, I would consider a few things. So if the volunteerism kind of works for what I could get behind, absolutely yes. I want to volunteer. I am deliberately applying to opportunities to volunteer, just like I have in the past. So absolutely. But if you're having difficulty getting volunteers, even when I've worked with other businesses and consulting, even with these young children, you know, how to encourage or come up with new ideas. You did a great job. 2 is better than 0. 2 is better than 0 in increasing the importance of volunteerism in the town and how it couldn't be burdens. It's not a burden, it's something you want to do and give back. So yeah, get more volunteers.
Thank you so much. Thank you for stepping forward.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And
Nice to
I
meet
go
you.
out. I go out. Then I wait for someone to get me. Thanks. My throat, filming.
Yeah, that's a
I don't know,
great
maybe
idea.
I'll
Is that still on?
I don't know, maybe I'll put Roger on the hot spot again.
Yeah, start that way, go this way.
There you go.
Sorry, Roger, you're last. No.
I'll ask you a question.
I couldn't believe it. Who was it?
Don't know.
Was it you?
Probably.
Yeah. I worked a long time thinking of that question, and boom, it was gone. And
Great minds.
Thank you, Mark.
Hello.
Thanks for coming back.
Yes.
Yeah, appreciate it. So again, if you just want to take a few minutes, tell us about yourself and your interest in the position, and then we'll go around with questions.
My name is Mark Petrowitz. I've been a resident since 2007, along with my wife. We live on Mitchell Street. My son was born in 2008 and has been in the school system throughout kindergarten. He is now here at Troutier. I'm employed at Fallon Community Health Plan in Worcester in the actuarial department. I also did serve for 3 years, almost 3 full years, on the Conservation Commission in town. And I am the treasurer of my Masonic Lodge in Westborough. The interest in the position really from 2 standpoints. One is that I feel it's probably, in my mind anyway, it seemed that the school Assabet Valley maybe doesn't have the I can't think of the word I want to use. It's not as well known in town as our, it's as our high school, as our Northborough South High School. So part of it was an understanding, how can I get involved in something that I think is important to the community? The other part, to be honest with you, is selfishness, which is my son's in 6th grade. And he is the kind of person who is perfect for trade school. He's the kind of person you put him down with anything and he will figure out a way to make it work. So it was kind of twofold. One of it's just wanting to be involved in the community. Again, once I finished up with Conservation Commission, the plan was to get involved in something else. I thought maybe Friends of the Library or some other, maybe involved in Chestnut Hill Farm, but something. So when I saw this on mysouthborough.com, I thought this would be perfect. So that's really the reason I'm here.
Thank you very much. So we're going to go opposite direction with questions. Mr. Chow.
Well, Mark, thanks very much for volunteering, for coming tonight. We appreciate that. If you took a minute of introspection and kind of evaluated what you feel you will bring to the board, what do you think the most significant capability you might have, or piece of experience to really kind of impact the board, and how do you think
having the business experience, I think, can be helpful. Working at Fallon Community Health Plan, we call our customers members, so we look at them as a member of our community health plan. So in that regard, I think I tend to look at the students as members in a similar way, and then you've got the parents who really are the investors in the corporation, in other words, they're sending their children to the school, and then you've got the community itself, which is also an investor. So being involved in various organizations and committees, and being involved at work where we've got different sides of the argument. We work closely with sales, and in a sales position, their main goal is to sell business regardless of whether it's profitable or not. We've got brokers who are concerned about their customers. Again, their main concern is not necessarily our main concern. We've even got people within the company who've got different areas of concern. Some are very interested in the members, some are very interested in the finances. So to sit down with any committee and to try to understand all of the components of any situation on the table is important, and I've always tried to take that into account. Less so as maybe, in this case, I would think probably less so as a resident of the town, and more as looking at school as a living entity that serves anyone who walks through its doors.
Thank you. Once again, I'll like to thank you for stepping forward. We really appreciate it. Can you talk about your level of familiarity with Assabet or technical schools?
I'll be blunt. My level of familiarity until recently was zero. I did not even realize it was an option. Driven by it many times on the way to my son's archery, but I had no idea. I probably was about a year ago when I realized that trade school wasn't even an option for students in Southborough. And again, it was the selfish aspect where I thought, well, gee, it would be great. My son went to one of the other trade schools in Framingham for summer camp. And I thought, this is him. And I thought, it's unfortunate he's not going to have that option. And I didn't realize until, I think, as he moved into 5th grade, that was an option. So my familiarity has been very limited. So I did spend some time on the website. So I wanted to get a feel as to how many students there were, what the level, I forgot. I'm such a geek, I made a little graph just to see over the last 10 years what enrollment was, to see how the school was faring. It looks like it's a fairly steady, slight incline. My question actually out back is how many students in Assabet Valley are from Southborough? I don't know if anyone knows that.
I'll defer to the school.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I don't know that.
Greg, any
that answer.
idea?
I know
It's not a huge
it's not a large number.
It's not.
No,
Right.
it's not.
Yeah, so I think I had very little understanding. So I spent some time on the website in the last few weeks just to understand what was available to the students, the process, and from there I was shocked, to be honest with you, how many various disciplines there are from the trade perspective. Obviously, you've got the base. And I was also very surprised at the level of not encouragement, but the disciplines within it, separate from the trade school. In other words, there was a strong core program where you're going to a high school. You're not going to a trade school. You're going to a high school that has trades within it. Because I think growing up in Worcester, there was very much, you went to high school, you went to trade school, and they looked at it very differently. And it seems to me that Aspen Valley is more of a blended program. And again, I was very surprised at the number of trades that existed, the options. So to me, in the short time I've learned more about it, I'm even more of an advocate for people understanding it's there as an option.
You know, I should know this. How many communities does Aspen Valley serve?
I believe that there are 7 or 8 member communities, but there are other municipalities that have the option to send students there as well. They pay a higher tuition rate than the member community, or they have to pay a tuition rate as opposed to the member community students.
Right.
Yeah, I looked at the enrollment numbers for Algonquin versus Assabet, and was surprised that the sizes were very similar. But obviously, there are many more communities feeding it. So I'm sure that provides some challenges in some ways versus certainly when they're younger, it's just our Southborough community. And I assume it gets a little more complicated when you start to add Northborough and Southborough. So I'm assuming there are much more complexities involved when you've got several communities sending students from all over. Even something simple as busing gets a lot more complicated, I'm sure.
Good, thank you.
Okay. So it sounds like you've done some research into Aspen, and based on what you have learned so far, are there any areas where you feel that your background and expertise would be particularly helpful from a governance standpoint, which is what the school committee does?
I can't think of any one particular thing. I've looked a little bit at the minutes, and it seems probably the hardest part of it is negotiating with the unions. I assume that's probably an area that's the most complicated. Is that true?
I mean, it's one of the things the school committee does. Budget is also
right.
Budget.
Yeah. So having worked for, strangely enough, nonprofits most of my life, but certainly companies where the bottom line is finances, I think bringing that eye to any conversation is important. But having said that, being in the community and having someone go through the school system, kind of have to look at it both ways. You need to be responsible to the community who's funding it, but you need to be responsible to the students who are attending the school. So I just think a broad business background certainly helps.
Thank you again for stepping forward. So I noticed that you have some experience teaching too. So I'm wondering if there's anything that you learned from that experience that you think can apply to this position.
That was a very long time ago.
Yeah.
Very long in a foreign country. So I would say probably not. I would say more of my experience is coming from being on the other side of it, sitting down with a student every night, to review. My wife would argue it's probably more her than me, but just learning how he's going through the school system, and really understanding, if a teacher's got one of mine, and then add that to 20 of the same type of individual, I just think it's probably more a matter of understanding the challenges a teacher has and understanding the challenges that the students have from that perspective. So I don't think I really have any teaching background that would help in that degree. No.
Hi, thanks for being here. One thing that, being on the school committee here, that I was, I didn't realize that everybody kind of went to a different subcommittee and took that kind of under their wing. So like I'm a policy,
Right.
some people are on budget, some people are, I think that's our main subcommittees right now, but is there one that you would be particularly interested in?
I'm not aware of the subcommittees, but I'm assuming there's one probably around programs themselves. In other words, as far as the disciplines, is there
Curriculum
one?
or-
Curriculum.
Yeah, I think curriculum would be an area I think I'd be most interested in. And to me, that's the part that's most fascinating because that's what the school provides that's different than what is provided at Algonquin. And looking at, the enrollment as far as is this curriculum something that maybe needs to be changed to draw more students in, or do we need to possibly bring in other disciplines? I didn't notice criminal justice, and I thought that might be something worth exploring down the road. Not that there's not a huge number of disciplines in there, but I think that might be something that might be helpful for students. The other thing, I did notice there's a separate business core in there, or business element, but one thing that I think is very helpful for anyone going into the trades is to learn how to be a good business person. I have had to use many tradesmen and women who are not good businessmen and women, unfortunately. And it hurts them, and it's sad because they're very good at what they do, but the business end of it is lagging, it's lacking, and I think they're hurting themselves in many ways where they shouldn't. So I think that's a component of, yes, you need to learn a trade, and you also need to learn the general skills that any high school teaches, but learning a little more of the business elements can be helpful. I mean, part of it to me is maybe knowing what you don't know, learning what you can't do. I'm not good at scheduling. I never have been, for example, maybe someone says to themselves. I'm going to find someone to help me do that. I can't do it all myself. And I think that's probably a component. Maybe the trades, maybe it's taught, maybe it's not. I haven't seen it. With many of the tradesmen I run into, I think that's very lacking.
The question I have, so obviously we're here tonight for the appointment
Right.
until May of next year. From that point on, it's an elected position.
Right.
And I'm just curious what thought you've given to taking that step to...
I knew that question was coming, and I knew it was coming from a Board of Selectmen. 100%. So a couple things. First of all, I would not know until after a year of really being involved whether I was making the difference and I should commit to another 4 years, because it is a commitment. And the other part of that is having said that, I would probably put my name in. And if there were a lot of other people interested, qualified people interested, I may pull my name out. I may say, I've done a year, I've made a difference, I'd like to move on to the next thing. I may feel passionate enough at that point to continue. I mean, my one question back to you is, my son would be entering the school within that period. Is that something that seems a conflict of interest or not?
There's a lot of school board members that have had kids in
All our
school.
kids
Yeah,
go to
okay,
school.
yeah. See, and that's good. Sometimes politically these things become problems. I mean, maybe I'm still have my conservation hat on, where you were constantly recusing yourself. But so from that perspective, so at this point, I couldn't say definitely. My goal at this point really was to fill a need, and I think to represent Southborough in that. So if I had felt that after a year that I was.
You're probably going to have about 8 months before the election.
Okay, right, that's a good point too.
Actually, less than that to pull papers.
And I was a little confused by the appointment ending in May, because the school year ends in June.
Yeah, so the term would end with the town election cycle.
Oh, okay, right.
So again, as Mr. Challen had mentioned, so January, early February timeframe, the election season begins. That's when nomination papers are available, and there's dates that the town clerk sets that then follow in place when papers have to be returned by, the last day to withdraw, et cetera, et cetera. So
I have one other major hook in all this, which is my wife. So she may or may not feel a certain way about that with my involvement in lodge and other activities. But I do think, considering that it is something that is very important to the community, not that conservation wasn't important to the community, but literally changes people's lives in one way or another, I would need to put a lot more thought into committing, because if I commit, I'm not leaving. mind staying for that period. And I don't think it's possible for you to answer this, but is it possible to answer why the position opened for you?
So person who held it, it's a 4-year term.
Right.
Person served 3 years and resigned in the spring time frame. Exactly why, I don't know.
Okay.
I can speculate. I know that he has a number of small children. I don't know if it just was too much of a burden for him with family life. That's speculation on my part.
Right.
I just don't know.
Because the one thing I wouldn't want is for you to have to do this again in this situation. I know everyone's busy, everyone has their own activities they need to be involved in, and both Board of Selectmen and school committee need to have your own functions. To have to fill a position that you thought was filled for 4 years takes away from that. So,
Well, unless someone resigns mid-term, it's an election, it's an elected process, so it's not, this particular process
Right.
wouldn't be repeated. Yes.
Ms. Brush.
Thank you. Thank you for stepping forward. It's nice to see you after being on Concom and wanting to give back to the town again. It's always a great thing. You brought a couple good points for me in some of the things you said, and I will say this tough, again, sitting at this end, because you all asked my questions as well. I just had lots of scribbles. But a couple of things you mentioned is, you weren't as aware of ASABET. I know we've all seen in the news how the trades, there's going to be a shortage in the trades in the future. And looking ahead through next year, maybe you do decide, if you get the position, that, I am going to run for the 4-year position. My question is, with your business background and everything behind you, how would you highlight in maybe working with the schools, or what would you maybe envision in expanding on what a lot of people don't know about ASABET and the trade schools that we have? How would you be their champion as you would be the representative from Southborough?
I think one of the things that would be helpful is our open houses, where it's announced, and this may be not something that's easy to do, but something that's worthwhile, is to announce the kids, please come for open house. Bring your children. They get in to see the school, and they get in to see various trades that exist. I mean, my son got very excited about middle school because of robotics, because he saw the robotics clubs at Southborough Summer Nights. That's what starts him down that path. And then when I mentioned, well, there's ASABET Valley Tech, and they have these programs that you're interested in, he gets very excited. So I think maybe a lot of it is to getting to the students at an earlier age and putting it in their heads that these are the options. For me, the thought was always, well, I'd like to go to college, so therefore I'm going to go to my community high school. That was the path I took, and that was the end of it. I never really explored the trades. I will say that a few years after I graduated, I thought, I wish I would have gone into electrical school and gone that path. So I think just opening up, even at the 5th grade level, because I do know that there is something that does occur at the later years. I think it's 7th, 8th graders, where they do have something with ASABET Valley. And I mentioned it to my wife because I think we got an email, and she said, well, he's too young. And I thought, no, he's not. You need to start them thinking about it sooner rather than simply saying, because my default was, okay, well, when he hits 9th grade, he's going to Algonquin. I never thought, what are the other alternatives? So I think to get the kids excited quicker, a little more, and say, well, these are the things you can do that you find interesting. Also, I think, and I noticed the gender breakout wasn't really as dramatic as I thought it would be. I thought it would be much more weighed toward male versus female, and I saw it was maybe 60-40, looked about to me, which I think is encouraging. So I think that's another component to say to the girls in the school system, here are the various options at a trade school you might not have thought about that make sense. I think the trades get looked down on, to be honest with you. And being in a community that's fairly affluent, considering where I came from, it probably is not necessarily looked at as something that's positive. So there's two components. One is to get the kids interested. If you get the kids interested, then the parents will be interested. I'm going to have this battle with my wife because her opinion is, oh, he's going to college. Maybe he is, maybe he's not. But if trade school is where he will flourish, why not go there? Why not play to someone's strengths rather than force them down one path or another. So, and I will say that when I looked at the schools, I looked on the school website, I noticed the first few weeks, there's this little trial period where you go in and you, I had in my high school, I think we had 4 quarters, and each one we took a different quarter. One was printing, one was television production, I forget, one was auto, and one was machinery. And it helps because it gives you an idea, this may be something I'm interested in. Giving you the thought of, well, I went to business school. It's very much, you didn't need to declare a major your first year. You were in business school, so there were certain guidelines, but you would take your various classes and decide, is accounting for me or is accounting the worst thing in the world for me? And I think that helped most of the people in my school. You had already made the commitment to go to business school, but then once you were there were so many options, and I think a trade school can provide that. So I think that's a big part of it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Sykes.
I had 3 or 4 questions, all of which have been preempted.
No.
I've heard what I need, thank you.
Well,
Thanks for
you.
volunteering.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Charlie, appreciate it. Sure.
That's the way they do it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But don't
Thank
leave
you.
permanently.
Yeah.
All right. So, what are your thoughts on if anyone wants to lead? I don't mind offering my thoughts first. I'll tell you, going into this, I was really impressed with Ms. Cahill's resume, and I thought that the experiences that she had would serve well. And again, I'll state it right up front too. I think both candidates would do an outstanding job, because I think Mark interviewed extremely well. And while Doris, I think, from the resume perspective, maybe had a bit of an advantage over Mark going in, I thought the research that Mark has done on Aspet itself and the information that he's picked up on it, I thought really played well in his favor.
Totally agree.
Yep. Yeah.
Although I had it the other way, I favored his resume over the other one, just because I saw some typos and that bugged me.
Says the writer, says the writer.
I think we were pretty fortunate to get such, 2 eligible candidates.
Yeah.
Really.
Well qualified.
I thought
Yeah.
they were, I mean, I really thought they were both extraordinarily forthright. I don't think we'd be poorly served to have either one selected. And I was trying to determine how important I thought the grant writing might be.
Yeah.
I don't know what needs Assabet has in that area. I mean, everybody always can use grant writing to some degree, but is more or less that. But certainly the fact that he did the research that he did speaks well for him. It really does. I think it's a tough decision.
I agree that I was very impressed with the amount of research that he did, and I think it speaks to him being able to hit the ground running if you were in the position and go in with already some background, at least as much background knowledge as you can get by doing research. And there's obviously more to learn, but he's had some good ideas, I thought, and I think would bring all of that, although I agree, they're both great candidates, but I was impressed by that.
I as well, and one of the things I also thought was he has a vested interest in Assabet as well,
Yes.
where he still has a young child in the school system, which doesn't take away from Ms. Cahill by any
Right.
means. And that was why I asked if she'd be willing to volunteer, at something else in town if this doesn't pan out. But I thought he also interviewed and did his homework very well, and didn't stammer too much or on any of the questions that were asked of him.
I know the tape's running, but I could see the wheels turning as far as the other opportunities you saw as possibilities.
They were.
Our first candidate. Okay.
You never know. There's a lot of vacancies, and I would certainly hope one or both of them, either one, the other would still step forward. And I think they both expressed an interest in that, so that's important as well.
The one thing that I heard as Mark was speaking, and forgive me if I get his name wrong, was it, and you might know, Mr. Denman, or who was the Assabet representative for so many years.
I think that's
Yeah.
correct. I think it is.
And he
I
would,
think that's
I
right.
remember him from town meetings in the past, standing up and being such a strong advocate for Assabet. And I heard
Yeah.
Mark continuing in that role of being an advocate for Assabet. And again, as Sam had said, having served on advisory for so many years and having them come in, was so impressed with Assabet and the administration over the years and the programs at the school.
And Mark was very honest about the fact that it may turn out that he doesn't end up with a child at Assabet, depending on,
I'll talk to him
you know,
about
sort of
that.
other negotiations, okay, that he's got in front of him. But
Yeah.
And I think too, both said that they, wanted to take this time to get in there and figure out what they wanted to do to see if they would actually run again. I guess it is a lot to ask until you actually know what goes on. So, but I think neither one would be afraid to speak up and be a good voice for Southborough.
Yeah.
I'm sort of where Brian was in terms of resume. I was leaning toward Ms. Cahill, certainly. But again, I was impressed by some of the things that Mark said. The only question, it made it clear that I actually didn't do enough homework, because I think part of the decision could be driven by what does the current committee look like in terms of if the members of the current committee have skills that look like Mark's, then in fact Doris's skill set would be a great diversity counterbalance kind of thing, and vice versa. So if we have a chance to do it again, I will certainly do more digging in terms of
I think, unlike any other committee in our town, like our board, your committee, the Conservation Commission that Mark was on, it's not a group of Southborough residents altogether on a group.
It's like 70 towns.
He's the one Southborough representative, so
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, I think we need to look out for ourselves and make sure that we pick the best person for ourselves. as
Strong
well.
he can
voice.
speak for us, our needs, etc.
Yeah, strong voice.
I could see Mark being a strong voice at town meeting, and I like
Yes.
that he was saying that, I agree, like, I knew nothing about Assabet until I got on the school committee here, and because we have neighbors one of our neighbors was on the school committee, and for Assabet, we have neighbors who go to Assabet, so I started looking into it more, and I love the idea that he wants to get the word out that, hey, eighth graders in Southborough, it's not your only choice. Like, we have another great high school that you can look at.
Yeah.
So,
I think it's important.
yeah.
Yep.
So I like that.
All right, so with all that, knowing that you folks have another full agenda ahead
Yes,
of you.
yeah.
I'll make a motion
Is there
that
a
we
motion?
appoint Mark Pekovich to the remainder of the term of the Assabet School Committee.
Second?
Moved, seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Passes unanimously.
Yeah, go see Doris.
I know.
All right.
I know, but I'm
so,
catching her before she
there's
leaves.
a motion to adjourn for the Board of Selectmen meeting?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We're good.
I move.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you again.
I move. We have to adjourn.
You should
the
adjourn
open
this
meeting.
one.
Yeah,
I
sure.
move that we adjourn the Southborough School Committee for this meeting.
Second.
Do you recess?
All right, now who's
All
going
in
to tell
favor?
Mark?
Okay.
Okay.